Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, was born in 570 of the Common Era. He was the son of Abdullah and is known as the Prophet Muhammad among believers in the religion of Islam. According to Islamic teachings, he was the last prophet or messenger of God who received revelation. Any time Muslims mention Muhammad's name, they add a special blessing by saying Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or peace and blessings be upon him. They do this for other prophets as well, prophets including Adam, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Muhammad was born into the tribe of Quraysh in the Arabian city of Mecca on the Arabian Peninsula. The Quraysh was the tribe that took care of the sacred Kaaba, or house of worship. They gave water and food to pilgrims who visited it. The Quraysh traced its ancestry back to Abraham and his son Ishmael. Muhammad's father died before he was born, and his mother died when he was just 6 years old. After the death of his mother, Muhammad lived with his grandfather and later his uncle Abu Talib. Abu Talib was a generous man, but not wealthy. He taught Muhammad to trade on their caravan journeys to Syria. A wealthy Meccan widow named Khadija employed Muhammad to sell her goods in Syria. She was so pleased with his work that she asked him to marry her. For 25 years, Khadija and Muhammad were happily married. Their 4 daughters lived to be adults, but their only 2 sons died in infancy. Muhammad did not like the idol worship of the Meccans or the unjust way that the rich treated the poor, and even members of their own tribe. He often spent time in thought and prayer in a cave outside of Mecca. There, on the Mountain of Light, Jabal an-Nur, Muhammad first experienced the call to prophethood. Muhammad described how the angel Gabriel awoke him and told him to read. Muhammad replied that he could not read. Gabriel then said, "Read," or recite, "in the name of your Lord, who created man from a clinging clot." These were the first verses of the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Muhammad was about 40 years old at the time of his first revelation. The experience frightened him, and he hurried home, shivering, to his wife Khadija, who wrapped him in a blanket. She reassured him that his search for truth would not lead them astray. Her cousin, Waraka, a man of faith, who knew the Christian holy books, reassured them that Muhammad's call to prophethood was true. He also warned them that his own tribe would reject him, as other prophets had been rejected by their people. After a short time, Muhammad began experiencing more and more revelations. These new verses told Muhammad to preach to his family. Members of Muhammad's household and immediate family accepted Islam, including his wife Khadija, the first Muslim woman, and first to embrace Islam. Later, he gathered members of his tribe and warned them to believe in only one God and to turn away from worshiping idols and behaving unjustly. All of them rejected him, except for his young cousin Ali, son of Abu Talib. The earliest Muslims were mainly poor people, slaves and women. Some important Meccans joined him, but the most powerful leaders of Quraysh continued to reject him. His growing influence among the members of Meccan society threatened their prestige and power. They bribed him with offers of wealth and power, but he refused to give up. The Quraysh persecuted the Muslims and finally banished them to a dry valley and forbade anyone from trading with them. Khadija and Abu Talib both died during the boycott. During this time, Muhammad sent a small group of Muslims to Ethiopia to seek asylum, or protection from persecution, which was granted by its Christian king. The Quraysh feared that Muhammad's preaching against the idols would reach their visitors during the pilgrimage, causing people to stop visiting the Kaaba. Visitors from Yathrib, a city north of Mecca, did respond to Muhammad's teachings. Seeing the suffering of the Muslims, they pledged to protect Muhammad and his followers in their town. Gradually, the Muslims left Mecca. When the Quraysh plotted to kill Muhammad, he and a close companion, Abu Bakr, secretly left Mecca to join the Muslims in Yathrib. Muhammad's journey in 622 of the Common Era is called the Hijrah and marks the beginning of the Muslim calendar. Yathrib was renamed Medinat an-Nabi, or the City of the Prophet. The people of Yathrib invited Muhammad to become their leader and arbitrator to solve the tribal warfare that was tearing Yathrib apart. Muhammad drew up an agreement of cooperation among the Muslims and the tribes of the city. To help the refugees from Mecca who had left all that they owned behind, Muhammad joined each migrant from Mecca in brotherhood with a Muslim from Medina. Those from Mecca were known as the Muhajirun, and those from Medina were known as the Ansar, or helpers. This policy helped the refugees to begin new lives and helped the new Muslims of Medina learn Islam from the experienced Muslims of Mecca. Muhammad's successful escape from the murder plot enraged the Meccan leaders. They had gained the wealth of the refugees, but they saw great danger from the Muslims. Muhammad's growing influence among the tribes of Arabia might replace the Quraysh leadership. They tried to weaken or eliminate the Muslims. Throughout his time in Mecca, Muhammad had not fought against Quraysh's persecution of the Muslims. In Medina, according to Islamic teachings, a Quranic verse now told the Muslims to fight the Meccans. The first battle came at the arrival of a Meccan caravan near the wells of Badr. Although the Muslims were greatly outnumbered, they defeated the Quraysh in the Battle of Badr. The Quraysh sought revenge in a second battle at Uhud Mountain, where many Muslims and Quraysh died. But the outcome was a standoff. Unable to defeat the Muslims as easily as they expected, the Quraysh planned to attack Medina with the help of allied tribes. Instead of going out to meet the attack, the Muslims fortified the city by digging a deep trench around the undefended part of Medina. The Meccans had never seen such a defense and were used to quick raids, but not siege warfare. During the Battle of the Trench, the Quraysh and their allies camped outside the trench and tried to break through. After many of their allies lost patience and went home, the weather turned bad, and the Quraysh broke camp and returned home, humiliated. The prestige with local tribes was in serious trouble, and their economic power was weakened by the new threat to their caravans. After the Battle of the Trench, Muhammad decided to make the pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj. Although the Quraysh had the ancient duty to honor visiting pilgrims, they stopped the Muslims outside of Mecca at a place called Hudaybiyah and denied them the right to visit the Kaaba. Instead of entering the city, Muhammad succeeded in getting the Quraysh to make a peace treaty. The treaty allowed the Muslims to make the pilgrimage the following year, and the Quraysh agreed to 10 years of peace, with other terms that seemed to benefit the Meccans. The treaty was a victory for Muhammad, however, for 3 reasons. First, the Quraysh, after trying to exterminate the Muslim community, had been forced to recognize it as a bargaining partner. Secondly, the Quraysh had failed in its traditional duty by keeping Muhammad away from the Kaaba and was already weakened by defeat in battle. And finally, the treaty gave both the Quraysh and Muhammad the right to make alliances with other tribes and allowed the Muslim influence to grow unchallenged. A short time later, the Quraysh broke the treaty. Muhammad marched an army of thousands toward Mecca. Recognizing certain defeat, the Quraysh surrendered the city without a fight. Muhammad granted amnesty and safety to any Meccans who stayed in their houses. He removed the idols from the Kaaba, and the Islamic call to prayer sounded from its roof, as it has every day since. After the conquest of Mecca, many people in Arabia began to embrace Islam. During his time, Muhammad married several women, including Aisha, the daughter of Abu Bakr, and Hafsa, the daughter of Omar, two important companions. Other wives were mainly older widows or women who helped to cement relations with their tribes. All agreed to the marriages. His wives spoke of him as a fair and affectionate husband and passed on the record of his words and deeds to later generations. Revelation of the Quran continued for 23 years, until shortly before Muhammad's death in 632 of the Common Era. He recited the final verse during a sermon on his farewell pilgrimage. By that time, the Quran had already been memorized by many of Muhammad's followers, recited in his presence, and written down by secretaries such as Zayd ibn Thabit. Many also had memorized or recorded Muhammad's words and deeds, which became known as the Hadith. The pattern of Muhammad's life came to be called the Sunnah, the second source of Islamic knowledge after the Quran. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was buried in the city of Medina in the house where he died, which was connected to the main mosque or masjid that had been the gathering place in Medina. Today, the masjid where he lived is known as the Mosque of the Prophet or Masjid an-Nabawi.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.